Hi, everyone. Welcome to our consumer behavior class. I'm glad that you could join me. Could I please ask my students if you guys could just send me a message in the chat so I can see that someone is here. So if you could just go to your chat and send me a quick message and say hi. Hi. Hi, James. Anyone else here? Can you guys hear and see me well? Hi. Good to see you all. Has been a long time, right? I can't see you, but I hope that you have a good connection and you can see and hear me. Yeah, circumstances have changed, right? And like with all of my other classes at the different universities where I teach, this will be an online class from now on. But I'm still glad that we can do it this way. I hope you guys are all fine, and I really hope that your families are doing well. Over here in Vienna, everything's okay. I'm not getting bored because there's so much online teaching to do right now, and obviously life has changed a bit, but we're carrying on. Well, let me get started with the class. Let me tell you what this course is all about. What we're going to do in this course, what the topics are, what the assignments are, and so on. And again, please feel free to use the chat to communicate with me. I really appreciate that. I'll try also to ask you questions from time to time, so there is at least a little bit of interactivity in this format. Okay. So first of all, what is the course all about? Here you can see I wrote everyday marketers use lots of different stimuli to influence purchase decisions. And in this course, you guys will learn how marketers can identify and employ these sources of influence. I want you to be able, specifically, I want you to be able to identify them. Now, there are many different aspects to consumer behavior. There are many different factors that lead into how people make choices, in a consumer context, how they make their purchase decisions and beyond. And we'll look at a lot of them. Okay, so this is a very broad course. And I know you guys learned a lot about this already in my previous courses last semester. But this time we're gonna delve even deeper. Now, basically, what we're gonna do is I would like to show you the various influences on consumer behavior and how you can use them. And basically, look at this guy here. Okay. We're gonna look at the brain, of course. Also, we're gonna look at how consumers process information. We'll talk about perception. We will also talk about motivation. So a variety of psychological concepts that come in handy for a marketer. So by the end of the course, you should understand this guy much better. So here are the course objectives. As you can see, I wrote, upon completion of this course, students are able to understand the relevance of consumer behavior for marketing strategy. You will appreciate the complexities of consumer behavior, the many different influences and how they work together. You will also be able to apply key principles of consumer behavior to the issues that are faced by small and medium-sized enterprises. And you will also learn how to apply social influence tactics and strategies to influence consumer behavior. So that's a lot, right? So here's the course content. Today, there's going to be an introduction to consumer behavior. We'll also talk about different views, both the marketers and the consumer's view. We'll also discuss, of course, consumer information processing. So basically how consumers process information in their mind. We'll discuss perception, how consumers learn, how they form attitudes, and of course also how we as marketers can change their attitudes. Furthermore, we'll talk about cultural influences on consumer behavior and also social influences, so how other people influence our consumer behavior. So that's a lot, right? Anyway, you guys, I'm sure you also want to know how you're going to get the grade in this course. So I haven't changed the grading scheme basically from the original format. There's going to be a final exam. Most likely, exam is going to be online. I can't say for sure yet because we don't know. We don't know, what's going to happen. But I assume it's going to be online. If not, I'll let you know. And that exam accounts for 70% of your grade. And there's also going to be a presentation, the social influence presentation. And guys, I just saw here that I made a mistake here. Obviously, it's not 60%. Apparently, with all the coronavirus in my head, maybe already, I got my math wrong. Obviously, it's 30% and not 60%. So 70% is the final exam and 60% is the social influence presentation, not 60%. I don't know what happened there. Okay, so much about that. Let me just have a look at the chat and see if there are any questions so far. Could you guys let me know? Could you guys let me know in the chat if you have any questions so far about the course? Nothing yet? Okay. Sounds good. Okay, then let me just show you a little more about the mechanics of the course. I'll talk about the readings that we have in the course, and of course also the project, the infamous 60% project, no, the 30% project. So let's have a look at that. And I'm juggling around with my screens here. Okay, so basically there is a book that you could use as an additional resource, and that would be Solomon Consumer Behavior, now in its 12th edition. But I would say if you study the material that I upload on our Moodle website, and if you study the material that we discuss here in this online lecture, you should be okay. However, there's a second book, and that book you guys really should get because you need it. You need it for your project. And that book is Cialdini, Influence, Science, and Practice. Let me show you. It's this book here, Influence, Science, and Practice by Robert Cialdini. You guys need this book for your project. Now, I really love this book. It's a great book. It's one of my favorite books, actually, and I'm sure you'll like it too. I have hardly ever heard anyone say, that didn't like this book. Trust me. Robert Cialdini, that's the guy here. He's one of the most well-known social psychologists, and he has studied persuasion and influence for a long time. He's not just a great scholar. He is also a great textbook author because this book is really fun to read. It really is. I know. I'm not exaggerating. It's great fun to read. In this book, he talks about, he discusses various principles of social influence. So how we are being influenced by other people, or principles that we can use to influence other people. And it's 6 principles that he discusses in this book. And again, I think it's written in a very, very entertaining way. So please get the book and use this book as a resource for your projects. So here you have the bibliographic information again. And here's not a project. What I would like you guys to do is, I would like to make a PowerPoint presentation based on this book, and I would like you to apply the principles that Robert Cialdini discusses in his book to marketing strategy. Because Professor Cialdini is not a marketer, he's not a marketing professor, he is a professor of social psychology. So yes, there are some examples in there that definitely refer to marketing, quite a few actually, but not all of them obviously. But what I would like you to do is, I would like you to take these principles and I would like you to think about them, to reflect upon them, and see how marketers can use them, how they're already using them, maybe what the limitations are. Of course, also there are ethical implications that you should take into consideration regarding using these principles. So it shouldn't just be a rehash of what he wrote in his book. That wouldn't be really a kind of an intellectual challenge for you. I would like you to make the application to marketing. So how is this going to work now in practice? I would like you to form teams, and for that, I will put the wiki on our Moodle website. And in this wiki, I'm gonna specify the teams. I also gonna write how many people per team. So all of that will be on there. I haven't put the wiki up there yet because I didn't want the rush to happen. You know, everyone going to that website right now, and then everyone is confused about what's happening in the course. So I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this later tonight. So later tonight, or by the latest by tomorrow, you can go to the Moodle website and you can assign yourself to the teams. Now, here's the thing. It's a wiki. So a wiki is a document that everyone can change. So please be respectful of that. Obviously, if someone assigns himself to a group, I mean, you don't change that. You can assign yourself to that group as well if there's still a spot in the group, but please do not delete anyone else's, what anyone else wrote there. Okay, so I trust that you will do this in a fair and equitable way. Now, once the teams are formed, I would like each team to prepare a PowerPoint presentation, as I said, and in this PowerPoint presentation, you should apply the 6 principles described in the book to marketing strategy. You can really structure your presentation based on these principles. You know, principles like if I go to the book again, you see, if I look at the various chapters, it starts basically with chapter 2. The first principle that Cialdini mentions is reciprocation, give and take. Then there is another chapter on commitment and consistency. That's the second principle. Then there is social proof, liking, authority, and scarcity. So these are these 6 principles, and I would recommend that you structure your presentation based on these principles, and then you apply them to marketing strategy. In case of the length of the presentation, I would count around 30 to 35 slides. If you need a little more, that's okay with me as well. That's fine, because you may have a different presentation style. The whole presentation is due on the 25th of June. Now, because of various limitations, you don't have to actually present those slides, so they should be self-explanatory, because you're gonna upload them, and I'm gonna read them, and I'm gonna assess them afterwards. So please make your slides self-explanatory. That's not what I would necessarily do if I were presenting live or presenting to you, because, you know, if you write too much in your slides, your audience is usually kind of bored. But in this case, you're gonna probably write a little more on the slides so that they are self-explanatory. Let me go back and see if there are any questions in the chat. What I can see here. Okay, I read, actually, when and how are we going to present to you? I think I answered that now, right? So you don't have to present these. You should just make the presentation and upload it on our Moodle website by the 25th of June. Do you have this book in PDF? No, I don't have the book in PDF, but I mean, I don't want to go into details about that, right? But obviously, please check on the internet. I don't think you will have much of a problem. Okay. Obviously, I would also recommend you guys are connected, right, with Facebook groups, etc. So once someone has the PDF, well, you can always share something. But I can't give you a PDF for obvious reasons, right? Google's our friend, yeah, kind of, I guess. Yeah, I'm an author myself, as you know, and well, what can I say? But in this situation, I get it. Okay, good. So Sophie wrote something here already. Look in the chat. Okay. Any other questions about this presentation? Now, maybe I have no idea, but maybe some of you may have talked to last year's class. They also had a similar presentation, but it wasn't exactly the same. So don't get confused by that, because last year I wanted each team to focus on one of the chapters of this book and then present it live. But this year I've changed this, and I want you to read through all of the chapters and make each group to make a presentation of the whole book. The reason for that is because in the live class, obviously a student would learn from the other students' presentations, right? But this wouldn't happen now. So if I told each group to prepare one chapter of the book only, now that you would know a lot about that specific topic, but the others wouldn't, because unless they read the book. So that's why I want all of the groups to focus on all 6 principles. So don't be confused if you talk to students who took this class before. So this is clearly a change. Nicole asked how many people per group. I will put that on our Moodle website in the wiki. You will see it. You will see it then and there. I still have to check exactly what the current student numbers is, the latest estimates that I get from LBS, and I will adjust that accordingly. Dan says, last year we've read for us part of the book with the letter of a girl to her parents. Yeah, you want me to read that again? I can do that. Okay, this is because I did this last time where I wanted to show my students, that this book is written in a fun and engaging way. So let me see if I can find that. I'll be happy to do that. So I'm gonna do a public reading here. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, here it is. This is a letter that Cialdini publishes in this book here. And this is a letter from a student to her parents. So I guess she's a freshman that's just moved to the dorms in college, and a couple of weeks later she writes this letter to her mother and father. So let me read. She writes, "Dear Mother and Dad, since I left for college, I have been remiss in writing, and I'm sorry for my thoughtlessness in not having written before. I will bring you up to date now. But before you read on, please sit down. You're not to read any further unless you're sitting down, right? Okay? Well then, I'm getting along pretty well now. The skull fracture and the concussion I got when I jumped out of the window of my dormitory when it caught on fire shortly after my arrival here is pretty well healed now. I only spent 2 weeks in the hospital, and now I can see almost normally. I only get those sick headaches once a day. Fortunately, the fire in the dormitory and my jump was witnessed by an attendant at the gas station near the dorm, and he was the one who called the fire department and the ambulance. He also visited me in the hospital, and since I had nowhere to live because of the burnt-out dormitory, he was kind enough to invite me to share his apartment with him. It's really a basement room, but it's kind of cute. He is a very fine boy, and we have fallen deeply in love. And we're planning to get married. We haven't set the exact date yet, but it will be before my pregnancy begins to show. Yes, mother and dad, I'm pregnant. I know how much you're looking forward to being grandparents, and I know you will welcome the baby and give it the same love and devotion and tender care you gave me when I was a child. The reason for the delay in our marriage is that my boyfriend has a minor infection which prevents us from passing our premarital blood test, and I carelessly caught it from him. I know that you will welcome him into our family with open arms. He is kind, and although not well educated, he is ambitious. Now that I have brought you up to date, I want to tell you that there was no dormitory fire. I did not have a concussion and a skull fracture. I was not in the hospital. I'm not pregnant. I'm not engaged. I'm not infected, and there is no boyfriend. However, I'm getting a D in American history and an F in chemistry, and I want you to see those marks in their proper perspective. Your loving daughter, Sharon. Right, so she is really using social influence here. And Cialdini, actually, the funniest thing about this thing here, it says figure 1, and below here, Cialdini writes, Sharon might be failing chemistry, but she would get an A in psychology. Indeed, indeed. She is a great marketer. She is a great social psychologist as well, because by contrasting, by writing the letter the way she did, she put that grade that she got into in perspective. So it doesn't seem as bad anymore, because many worse things could have happened, right? So this is kind of how this book is written. So and the rest of the book is written like that as well. So I think you're really going to enjoy it. Okay. Do you guys have any other questions about the assignment? I'm looking at the chat to see if any questions are coming in. No, I don't see anything. I don't see anything right now. Okay, in that case, let me progress. So, here's. Okay, I can see we have some visitors outside of the class as well. Hi. Okay. Yeah, of course, I won't stop smiling, because, I mean, it's better to have a smile on your face than a frown, right? Okay. So let's carry on. I need to juggle my windows here a little bit. No, it's not what I wanted. Here we are. Okay, so I'm going to switch you to my slides for a moment. So this course today is my introduction to consumer behavior. First class, right? I gave a bit of an overview, but what are we going to do next, actually, today? Well, let me show you my agenda. Here's our agenda. First of all, we're going to talk about what exactly is consumer behavior. I mean, it's a big word, but I think we all need to know. We all need to be kind of on the same level. We need to kind of use the same definition, because otherwise we're going to talk about different things. So first, definition of consumer behavior. Then I would like to show you the so-called 7 keys to consumer behavior. The 7 keys are basically 7 very important things to know about consumer behavior. A lot of that we're going to talk in much more detail in the course. Not all of these 7 keys, but most of them we're going to talk about in much more detail. But I want to give you a bit of a preview, so to say, important things to know about consumer behavior. Then we're going to talk about pitfalls in the study of consumer behavior. So what if the traps, so to say, that we could fall into when studying consumer behavior? There's a couple of them, so you should know them. Different perspectives on consumer behavior. There isn't just one perspective, but there is at least 3 different perspectives that we can take when we study consumer behavior. We'll look at the marketer's view. This is how marketers look at consumer behavior. And we'll also look at the consumer view. This is how consumers themselves look at consumer behavior. And finally, I would like to conclude today with the dark side of consumer behavior, okay? The dark side, okay? Not all consumer behavior is good and nice and happy. There is also a couple of things that are really, really dark, okay? And we're gonna talk about those as well. Okay, so let's get cracking. The first question is, what exactly is consumer behavior? Now, there are many different definitions. Here is one that I would like to show you guys, and that is, according to my definition here, consumer behavior is about the activities of consumers. In consumer behavior, we try to study and we try to understand the activities of consumers. And there's 3 types of activities. There are cognitive activities, emotional activities, and physical activities. Now, what are they? Cognitive activities are consumer activities that relate to thinking. So, for example, a consumer making a choice between product A and product B, and considering the various features of the product, the various benefits of the product, that would clearly be a cognitive activity, a thinking activity. Also, everything that refers to perception is also a cognitive activity. So how we perceive the world around us. Then we have emotional activities. Emotional activities refer to feelings, right? To emotions. And emotions also play a big role in consumer behavior. I think you guys remember from our previous classes how important emotions are. They're important in retailing. We talked a lot about hedonic shopping before, right? How consumers go shopping because they want to have fun shopping. Now, of course, in order for them to have fun, we also need to create a point of sale that is fun, that is enjoyable, and so on. That's emotional. Now, in case you wonder, of course, right now, in the situation that we're in right now, under the coronavirus, right, this hedonic part of shopping, of course, has really been decimated. There's not much left at the moment, right? When we go out shopping, for purely utilitarian purposes, to procure products, to get to the shop, to get to the supermarket, to buy our products as quickly as possible, and then get home again. That's reality for most of us right now. But times are gonna change. There will be a time in the not so distant future, right, where there will be hedonic shopping again. Trust me on that. I'm pretty certain about that. So that's emotional activities. Of course, also when people watch advertisements, when they watch TV commercials, for example, or video commercials, there are emotions play a big role in this as well. Let's not forget about physical activities also, because consumers also engage in physical activities, like when you go to the store and you grab your shopping basket and you put products in that shopping basket. That's a physical activity. And marketers are sometimes overlook this kind of, because they focus on cognitive and emotional, but physical activities are also quite important. I think an example that I gave you last semester was that in retail stores, it's really important to have shopping baskets inside the store, not just at the entrance. Remember why? Because when shoppers enter the store, often they don't take a shopping basket, and then they start buying stuff, and they grab one thing, and then they grab another thing, and then they grab another thing here, and another thing here. These are my disinfectant wipes right now. Why am I lucky? I found some. Okay, so and so on, and then at some point, their hands are full and they stop shopping. Simple, but true. Physical activities. If we consider the physical activities, we realize that we need to give them a shopping aid, like a shopping basket or something like that. So now, what are these activities specifically? Well, consumer behavior is interested in how consumers select products, how they make a selection, how they purchase them, how they consume them, also what they do with these products. It's also important for marketers to know, and even how to dispose of them, how they get rid of them. So let's say you have a car and you buy a new car. What do you do with the old car? Do you sell it back to the retailer? Is there a buyback option, or do you sell it privately to another consumer? Is the car being destroyed, or do you just leave it in the woods? In case you leave it in the woods, make sure that you remove, the number that is an identifier. Okay. Anyway, not that I would recommend that, and so on, right? So that's the disposal. So consumer behavior is really broad, and of course, it's about products and services, both physical goods and intangible or mostly intangible services. And why do consumers engage in all of this? Well, they do this in order to satisfy their wants and needs. Now, let me quickly check the chat so that I see if there is anything so far. What I can see here in the chat. So we have to read the whole book and summarize it. Jacob, no, not exactly. I mean, the first part of your comment in the chat was correct. Yes, you should read the whole book, but you shouldn't summarize it, okay? Because summarizing would be kind of boring. I mean, Cialdini did a really, really good job. I mean, in his book, I think it's hard to beat that in a summary. I want you to take the principles from the book, and I want you to apply them to marketing strategy. So in order for this, it's not just a simple summary, it's applying it. So you kind of need to understand these principles also. Okay? Good. Then let's continue. Let's continue with one moment, please. Let me continue with my slides. So just to show you the breadth of consumer behavior, here are some of the questions that consumer behavior asks. For example, why do different consumers purchase different products? Why doesn't everyone buy the same? What is the best way to buy a specific product or service? Or how does advertising work? What are some of the mechanisms of advertising to influence consumer preferences? All of these are questions that consumer behavior would ask. Now, consumer behavior as a field of study is very, very broad. It's a broad field of study, and it's also a relatively recent formal field of study. So consumer behavior hasn't been around that long. If you think about science, there are many areas of science that have been around for a long time, for hundreds of years. Consumer behavior isn't one of them. Consumer behavior is based on psychology, and psychology itself is a relatively recent field. Psychology, the academic study of psychology, started only about a little more than 100 years ago, I would say. Maybe in the late 1900, around I would say 1880, 1890. That's kind of like approximately, I guess, when the formal field of psychology started. And consumer behavior, which is based a lot on psychology, not entirely, as you will see, but a lot on psychology, started much later. It really started in the 1940s, 1950s. But then it has grown a lot, and there are many consumer researchers these days that study consumer phenomena. It's really an interdisciplinary field. Interdisciplinary means that consumer behavior is studied by researchers with many diverse backgrounds: psychologists, social psychologists, sociologists, economists, political scientists, even economists. I think I mentioned them already, right? So there are many different perspectives on consumer behavior. So in that sense, consumer behavior is interdisciplinary. It's also interdisciplinary because if you really want to understand consumers, you need to look at them from many different perspectives. You really need to take a 360-degree view of consumers to really understand them. So in that sense, it also makes sense to see consumer behavior as an interdisciplinary field. So it's not just marketers or marketing professors who study consumer behavior. It's people from many other fields as well. Okay. Here, what I want to show you, this is the Journal of Consumer Research. It's the most well-known academic journal in the field. Nowadays, there are many journals that publish new insights, new studies about consumer behavior, but this is kind of like the leading journal in the field, the Journal of Consumer Research. It's also published by an organization called Association for Consumer Research, which is the leading organization for scholars who study consumer behavior. So if any of you, you want to dig deeper, there are plenty of journals and plenty of articles published every day about consumer phenomena, because it's just a very, very broad field. Okay, now in consumer behavior, there's two different types of consumer research. There is what we call descriptive research. There is what's called inferential research. Descriptive research tries to describe the actual state of the consumer marketplace. So basically, descriptive consumer research is about consumer statistics that describe the consumer marketplace. So for example, descriptive consumer research would be if you study what percentage of consumers buy products online, what percentage of consumers use their cell phones to make purchases online. That would be something. This is just a description, kind of like statistics about consumers and the behavior that they show. Obviously, descriptive consumer research is very useful. We need that kind of information to make better marketing decisions. But we won't focus so much on it because it's not that complicated, I would say, or it's basically stuff that you can find there. If you go, there are statistical offices that publish information like that. There are marketing research companies that provide you with statistics about the consumer marketplace and so on. I don't think there is so much to teach about that, really. The other part of consumer research is called inferential consumer research. And this is what our course will focus on, because inferential consumer research doesn't just describe the consumer marketplace. It tries to understand it. So the key question here is, why do consumers behave the way they do? Or how will they likely react to new types of products or services? So we try to get an insight into the consumer's mind. And this is what we are going to focus in this course. Now, as I showed you on the agenda, I would first like to talk about the so-called 7 keys to consumer behavior. Now, what are these 7 keys? Here they are. The first key is consumer behavior involves many activities. The second key is it is motivated. The third one, consumer behavior varies in timing and complexity. It's a process. It's influenced by external factors. It involves many different roles, and consumer behavior differs for different people. Okay, so that was kind of an overview of the 7 keys to consumer behavior, just to mention their names. Let's now look at them one by one. Okay. looking at your chat for a moment, yeah, you will have access to this. It's going to be on YouTube. This is a YouTube stream, so you can find it. I made it a public stream actually. So yes, you can find it. You can find it on the website. And my picture block's part of the slides. Well, you have the slides. You can find them on our Moodle website anyway. Okay, so the first key is consumer behavior involves many activities. I think it's important for us to kind of recognize how consumer behavior, how many activities there are really that consumers engage in. And I've mentioned just a few of them here. So for example, consumers think about the purchase. They think about the particular product. So I don't know, maybe right now in this situation, so that we do so much online, maybe you think about buying a new webcam. Okay, you realize your old webcam isn't working very well. You need something better. So you think about the product. You might be viewing ads. Maybe you see an ad online for a webcam. You may see a display. Well, it's not very likely right now that you see a product display in a store, right? Because these stores, in most countries, these kind of stores, electronic stores, are closed. You could observe others. Maybe you notice that your friends or your colleagues at work are using, having brilliant pictures, right? When they're on video chats and so on, and you wonder, okay, how can I do this? Okay, and that's kind of, then you ask them maybe about, what webcams they're using. Discussion with friends or family. Maybe you talk about that with other people. What webcams they are using, or if you should get the new one. Then finally, you decide, you make a purchase decision. So you have to think about, okay, what product is clear? It's going to be a webcam. Where are you going to buy it? It's not going to be in a store right now, right? Because stores are closed in most countries. Online, so which online retailer are you going to use? How are you going to buy it? When are you going to buy it? Right away? Or are you going to wait a little more and see, if you still need it a while from now? Visiting stores, in our case right now, it would be visiting online stores. You would evaluate alternatives. So you maybe look at different models to see which one suits you best. Discussion with salesperson, that's not going to happen right now, okay? But online, maybe many stores nowadays have online chats actually, where you could perhaps discuss what webcam would be suitable for you. So then finally, you have to make a decision. Which brand are you going to buy? Which type? Where are you going to buy it? Et cetera, et cetera. You have to arrange for payments, et cetera. And once you have made the purchase, there are things like storing the product, preparing the product, using the product, and so on. In the case of the webcam, obviously, you need to install it. Maybe you have to download the software. You have to learn about it, how to use it, maybe the special features that it has, and so on. And then maybe you talk to your family about it. Maybe you talk to your friends in your chats about your new webcam, and this way you also spread the information. So that's kind of just a quick overview of the many different features that, the many different decisions and many different activities that are involved in consumer behavior. And there are lots and lots more. I just mentioned some of them, or the most important ones. So as you can see, there really is a lot for marketers to study, to really understand consumer behavior. The next point I would like to make is that consumer behavior is a means to an end. So it's motivated. Consumer behavior is motivated. So when people make consumer-related decisions, there's always that they have a goal, basically. They're goal-directed. They do things because they want to achieve particular goals. So it's very important in consumer behavior to also study consumer motives. What are the motives of people? Why do they buy certain products? The tricky thing here is maybe when you study consumer motives, that consumers don't usually have just one motive for a certain action. So when a person buys a car, or when a person buys a TV, or when a person buys a computer, there's usually a variety of motives that they may have. So it's not as clear cut as it may perhaps seem on the outset, at the beginning. So we'll talk more about consumer motives in this course. There's going to be a lecture on this also in the future. But for now, I would just like to differentiate between functional motives and self-expressive motives. It's an important distinction. Functional motives relate to the product's performance, whereas self-expressive motives relate to the person's desire to express something about himself or herself. So let's think about making a purchase. Someone is buying a car. Okay, when buying a car, a functional motive might be that you realize in order to go to school, using public transportation is not an option for you. It's very difficult, takes a very long time. It doesn't fit you. So maybe a functional motive would be, okay, to purchase a car because you realize that this will make you more productive going to school or going to work. Also function, so that would be a functional motive. Or maybe you realize that for your family, it's important to have a car to make purchases or things like that. Those would be functional motives. Okay, so when you choose a car based on functional motives, you would look at things like quality ratings, the performance of the car, the fuel consumption, is it a good price, and so on. On the other hand, self-expressive motives relate to a person's desire to express something about himself or herself. So a person could also buy a car and have a self-expressive motive. Buying a fancy car, a sports car, to show that you're cool, to show that you are sexy, to show that you are successful and you have money. Okay, these would be self-expressive motives. Now, again, it might not be an either or. So it would be very simplistic to say that the person buys a car only purely for functional reasons, for functional motives, or for self-expressive motives. It could be both, of course. But for one person, the functional motives might be prevalent, and for another person, the self-expressive motives may be more important. So that's so much about motivation. Again, we'll come back to the topic of motivation in the future. Now, the next thing that I would like to talk about is that consumer behavior differs in timing and complexity. By that I mean is, what I mean by that is, timing refers to how long a process takes. Now, some consumer behavior is very short, other consumer behavior is very long. An example of short consumer behavior, well, if you just go to the vending machine and you buy a soft drink, and then you consume that soft drink, you take a sip and then another one and so on, right? That's very short. A long time of consumer behavior, a consumer behavior that takes a long time would, for example, you being a student in an academic program, it takes a couple of years to complete that. I know at first glance it may seem a bit strange, that's consumer behavior, but yes, it is. It's a service that is being offered by an organization, and you're a consumer, but it's in this context as well. But it's a very long process. It takes several years, and also it's a complex process. I mean, buying that soft drink at the vending machine is a very simple thing, right? There are not many decisions involved in that. But of course, deciding what to study, where to study, what program to enroll in, to continue or not to continue your studies, how you're going to study, all of this is a very, very complex type of consumer behavior. Now, consumer behavior is often kind of complex. Some purchases or some purchase decisions or consumption decisions are simple, but a lot of them are quite complex. And so for complex decisions, our mind has to work a lot, right? Here's our brain again. So this sucker here really has to do a lot of work, making these decisions. And you know what? Here is the ugly truth: as consumers and as human beings, in a sense, we're a little bit lazy. Our brain doesn't want to work more than it has to, because it has so many functions that it needs to perform. So the brain likes to take shortcuts. People and consumers therefore like to take shortcuts, and these shortcuts are called heuristics. Now, a heuristic is a rule of thumb, a mental shortcut that helps us make decisions more easily. There are many decisions that we use on a daily basis because we can't think everything through. That's just not possible. It would strain our brain too much. Our brain just has too much to do to make a perfect decision on everything, to think everything through in a very, very detailed way. So we rely on heuristics. And heuristics, generally speaking, are perfectly okay. We need them. They simplify decision making. But of course, heuristics can also be misleading. We don't always make the best choice because heuristic may be misleading. So heuristics are helpful on the one hand, but they can also not lead to an optimal outcome on the other hand. Let me show you some one or two examples of heuristics that consumers would use. So here is one of them. One of the heuristics that we use as human beings is the heuristic: what is beautiful is good. We value beauty. If something is beautiful, we also consider it to be good. Also, other people, if a person is beautiful or if a person is handsome, we also have a tendency to assume that this person is a good person or an intelligent person or a morally upstanding person. So, for example, I did a study a couple of years ago about the role of attractiveness in personal selling. And in this study, my colleagues and I investigated what effect it has if the salesperson is attractive or not so attractive. And what we found in this study, it was quite a large-scale experiment that we conducted. And what we found in this study was that people, first of all, considered salespeople that were attractive. They considered them to be better salespeople. They considered them to be more intelligent. They considered them to be better communicators. And here's the weird thing. People even considered the product that they sold to be better, of a better quality. In a sense, that sounds strange, right? Because the product obviously has nothing to do with the person in a logical, in a rational sense. But consumers still transferred the attractiveness of the salesperson to the neutral product. In case you wondered what the product was, it was a soda maker. It was a simple soda maker. And the way we did it was, in this experiment, we had a guy and we also had a woman. These were our actors. They were the presenters. They played the role of the salespeople. And with each of them, we made 3 videos. And I had a professional makeup artist who would change their appearance. So she would either make them look attractive, applying a lot of makeup and style their hair and everything, or she would make them somewhat less attractive, or she would make them unattractive. Yes, that's also possible to do. As a matter of fact, what I learned is it's much easier to make someone look unattractive than, the other way around. I don't know what that principle is. There must be a principle. It must be kind of a law of nature or something like this. But it's quite easy, to make someone look unattractive. The opposite, takes a lot more time. So what we did, actually, we started with 2 people that were judged to be attractive on the outset because that was therefore easier for us to make them less attractive. So so this is a heuristic. Now, notice please that this heuristic can be misleading, or is often misleading, really, because clearly, if the salesperson, like here that you see in the picture, just because the salesperson is pretty, it doesn't mean that she knows a lot about the product, or that she cares about you or whatever. Maybe she does, or maybe she doesn't. But still, we're, at least to a certain degree, influenced by it. and not just in marketing, but in other walks of life as well. Let me give you an example of another heuristic. The other heuristic is that consumers, for example, use is price equals quality, the price quality heuristic. So many of us do this, not all the time, of course, but generally speaking, we infer the quality of a product from its price. So, for example, a product like wine, a lot of people don't know much about wine, including myself. I mean, I've taught wine marketing before, but to be quite honest, I don't know much about wine, you know. I prefer beer, I guess. But anyway, you know, when you have guests over, you want to for dinner, when we have a dinner party or something like this, and when we serve wine, obviously you want to serve something to your guests, you know, that they will like, and maybe you want to impress them a little bit or something like this. So you don't want to. You don't want to be embarrassed by your choice of wine. But what wine are you gonna buy? Because if, like most consumers, you don't know much about wine, well, maybe you go by the label. And I know that from studies that I conducted myself, a lot of consumers go by the label. So they look at the label, and based on what the label looks, they make a choice, and they also go by the price. So if they buy a wine that they want to give to someone as a gift, or if they serve some wine to their guests, they may actually choose a more expensive wine, not because that wine is necessarily better, but because they assume it's better because of the price. And this also happens, of course, for many other purchase decisions as well. So a lot of consumers would, for example, not buy the cheapest product. They may buy on many product categories, at least. They may perhaps, if they want a cheap product, they would still go for a cheap product, but they might not buy the cheapest because they assume that the cheapest product might be of lousy quality. Now, it could be of lousy quality, absolutely, but it doesn't have to be like that. It could also be that the cheap product is really good, and the more expensive product could be bad. It could be of bad quality. But that's a heuristic, right? It's not thinking it through, because if we went through all the steps, if we compared the different products, if we got a lot of information, we would derive at an optimal decision. But we don't do it because we don't have the time. We don't want to. We don't have the resources to do that. So we, as consumers, and also in other areas of life, we often rely on heuristics. Of course, as marketers, it's very, very important to know about heuristics, because if you understand what heuristics consumers use, then marketers can also use that in marketing strategy. Okay, let me go to our chat for a moment. And now I have a question for you guys. I would like you to think for a moment, and could you please write in the chat other heuristics that consumers might use. So think for a second and let me know what other heuristics you can think of. I'll wait for you here and see what comes my way. So what other mental shortcuts are consumers using? Stereotypes, Sophie writes. Yeah, I mean, heuristic stereotyping. Sure, stereotyping is closely related to heuristics. Absolutely right. Yes. Good, Sophie. What else? What else can you guys think of? What other heuristics consumers might use? Shortcuts, mental shortcuts, rules of thumb. Country of origin, very good. You know, that was on my mind right now as well. The country of origin effect. Yes, the country of origin effect means that consumers, when they purchase products that were produced in another country or another region, they take the country or the region into consideration. So a product that comes from Italy, or a product that comes from Germany, or a product that was manufactured in the United States or in China or in Japan, people associate certain things with that. So to give you an example, you know, if you think of a product, product that comes from Italy or from France, right? People would think of It's something stylish, elegant, good taste. A product that comes from Switzerland. It must be high technical quality, must be very solid, probably a similar association people have with Germany, and so on, right? So that's the country of origin effect. By the way, it can be positive or negative. And again, it's a heuristic because not every product that is made in Italy is necessarily stylish or is necessarily fashionable. And not every product that is made in Germany is necessarily of high technical quality. But according to this heuristic, according to the country of origin effect, this is kind of the associations that people would have. Let's see what else we got here. Social proof. Sure. If other people, social proof, absolutely right. One of the principles that is discussed by Cialdini also. If other people use, a lot of other people use a product, it must be good, right? Everyone buys it. Well, you know, how can everyone be wrong? Well, everyone can be wrong, right? But yes, that social proof is certainly a heuristic as well. Celebrity branding. Celebrity branding, sure. Celebrity branding is also something, if a celebrity uses it, then it must be a good product. Yes, very good. Now, there was a lot of research done on celebrities, by the way, about spokespersons and celebrity endorsers. And it seems like there's a couple of factors that go into this. A celebrity works really well, first of all, if it's a likable celebrity, right? Because there are celebrities that we like and there are celebrities that we don't like. So obviously it has to be someone who is likable. And maybe you've heard, of course, you know, international celebrities, sometimes there are scandals, and when they're involved in a scandal, that likability factor may kind of really go down. To give you an example of that, think of Tiger Woods, the golf player, right? A couple of years ago, there were all these stories about him, you know, basically, you know, being unfaithful to his wife and all of that, and he really tanked. Okay. So a lot of companies dropped him as a celebrity endorser because of the likability factor. Another issue is, of course, the expertise of the person. We want to have celebrities who are considered to be experts in their field. So we need to make sure that the celebrity is someone that we think would be someone who has expertise in the area. So, for example, if you take if you take an athlete. Now, an athlete selling a product that is related to sports makes a lot of sense. The same athlete may be trying to convince us that we should use a certain bank or a financial service, may not necessarily work as well because we don't associate it. We don't associate that with the athlete. Okay, let me see here again in our chat. Anything else? Any other heuristics that you can think of? Is there anything else that you guys can think of? If an item is hard to get, we are more likely to consider it valuable. Yep, exactly. That's scarcity, right? I think we talked about the scarcity principle last semester. Very good. Yep. Scarcity is definitely a heuristic as well. If something becomes much more valuable if it's hard to get, right? So that reminds me, of course. To this, right? I mean, would you like to have that? Disinfecting wipes. I have one. Okay. Right. It used to be something very mundane. I remember actually I bought these in the States a couple of weeks ago, at the local Walmart or something like this. It was the most mundane thing to buy. There were hundreds of these, right? Nobody cared about it. We just bought it because we were traveling somewhere, and we wanted to, you know, in the hotel room, we wanted to clean the remote control or something like this. At the time, we thought, well, you know, that's germs, but we didn't really take this seriously. Nowadays, of course, something like this is very valuable, right? I mean, so I hope nobody's going to break into my house now because I have those. Gonna keep it. Okay. Okay. Good. So much about heuristics. Let's move on to another one of these 7 keys. The next key is consumer behavior as a process. So I think a lot of you might be familiar with that, right? Consumer behavior, it's a process. And if you want to study this process, it makes sense to kind of divide consumer behavior into 3 phases. There is what's called the pre-purchase activities, the purchasing activities, and the post-purchase activities. The pre-purchase activities is everything, all the decisions and everything, all the activities basically that a consumer engages in before making a purchase. So thinking of a product, talking with friends and family about the product, watching a commercial, reading consumer reports, reading ratings on Amazon, all of that is pre-purchase activities, right? Comparing products also. Then there's purchasing activities. This is actually buying the product and everything that's related to that, the actual purchase, paying for it, etc. And then the last part of that process are post-purchase activities. Post-purchase activities are often overlooked by marketers because they happen after the consumer has made a purchase. But you see, post-purchase activities are very, very important as well. And I would like to ask you guys at this point, why do you think it's important for marketers to also consider post-purchase activities? Why should marketers even care about what happens after a person has made a purchase? They have already bought the product, right? So why should we care? What do you think? Let's see. What do you guys write? Okay, so Sophie writes, okay, to get feedback. Yeah, to get feedback, sure, it's important to get that. Okay, Jacob writes evaluation. Yeah, exactly, Jacob, because consumers evaluate the product at this in this stage. Absolutely right. They evaluate the performance of the product, and they compare the actual performance to their expectations, right? And when they do this, when they make this comparison between the actual performance of the product and the expectations that they had, this is what leads to satisfaction or dissatisfaction. So if the actual performance is higher than their expectations, they're really happy about it. They're highly satisfied, right? If the performance equals the expectations, they're satisfied, kind of okay. But if the performance is less than their expectations, then, you know, the marketer has a problem, because then consumers will be dissatisfied. And this, of course, then can also lead to negative aspects, right? So yes, if they're satisfied, they would recommend the product, they would spread word of mouth. Yes, absolutely right. I agree with that. And also, word of mouth is very, very important for marketers because it's a very credible form of communication. But this happens after the consumer has made an evaluation usually, right? If it's a positive evaluation or a negative one, because when a consumer is dissatisfied, obviously they also, you know, engage in word of mouth, and that can be very, very negative for the marketer then. So yes, they spread information, positive or negative. So here's one implication of this that I would like to point out, and that is marketers must be really careful not to overpromise. There is kind of a tendency of marketers to overpromise, because as marketers, That's kind of in our bloodstream, I guess, right? We overpromise. We talk about our products in the best possible terms. Our products are so great. Everyone should buy them. Sure, that's important, and I'm not saying that a bit of exaggeration is bad necessarily, but don't do it too much, because if you do that, then consumers will you raise the expectation levels of consumers so much that the actual performance of the product just can't hold up to it. It can't compete with that. So be very, very careful not to promise too much. So don't overpromise, because it's gonna bite you in your behind, once the consumer is in the post-purchase phase. Okay, let's move on to the next factor, the next of the 7 keys, and that key is consumer behavior is influenced by external factors. Here I want to show you that there are many factors from the outside, factors that are not inside the consumer's brain, but outside factors influence consumer behavior. And here you can see them. Consumer behavior is influenced by culture, by subculture or microcultures. A subculture or microculture is part of the overall macroculture. And society consists of various subcultures or microcultures. There's, for example, think about different parts of a country. Not people in different parts of the country may be very similar in many respects. The culture may be very similar, but they're also dissimilar in certain respects. Even a small country like Austria, there are already some microcultures based on regions. Think about the east of Austria and the west of Austria. The geography is different, the climate is different, the way people talk, their dialect is different, their food preferences are somewhat different also. I'm not saying that it's all differences, but there are some differences, and those are the microcultures. Microcultures could also be based on religion, microcultures could be based on age, and microcultures could be based on ethnicity and so on. So yes, we have to look at the macro culture, the overall culture of a country, and how it influences people, but also at the microcultures or subcultures. Now, of course, for a large country, that's even much more important, right? I mean, we talk about China a lot these days, and we think about China a lot these days. But obviously, there isn't just one China. I mean, China is enormous. It's an enormous country, and it's a huge country. And of course, there are many different microcultures. There are religious microcultures. There are microcultures with regards to the language. Not everyone speaks Mandarin as their first language, right? Some of you who study Mandarin, I'm sure you know much more about this than I do. And so on, right? So, or India also. In India, you can see the microcultures. There is English that that Indians use as a common language. But when I was traveling through India, I really noticed the various microcultures. You move from one state to another, and they speak a completely different language. No, in India, not everyone speaks Hindi. There's, I think, about 100 languages that are spoken in India. Just imagine. Okay, so consider both the culture and sub or microculture. We also need to consider social class as an external factor. And social class is a really interesting concept as well, because a lot of people get it wrong. A lot of people, when they think of social class, they think of money. They think, high class means a lot of money means high class, somewhat less money, middle class, and little money, that's kind of working class, right? But that's not exactly true. Money is one of the let's be more precise, okay? Income is one of the factors that goes into social class, but there's a couple of other factors as well. So, for example, education also is a factor that contributes to social class. So the educational level of a person also contributes to what social class a person is in, and also their position, their job. Now, you could also add some other aspects as well, of course, into this, but these 3 aspects are the most commonly used components of social class when we want to measure social class. Now, why is that important? Well, because if you only focus on income and you say, okay, people who have the same income, they are of the same social class. If you said that and assume that their consumer behavior is the same, that's absolutely not true, because the education, the job, and some other factors play a very, very important role. For example, what brands people buy or what kind of products they buy and so on. So two persons may have the same income, but they may still belong to different social classes, and their consumption might be influenced by that. Now, family is, of course, also an external factor. Now, when we talk about family, this is our we mean the family, our parents, right? This is kind of one type of family, our parents, our siblings. But of course, once you form your own family, also your family would also be the family, like your children, your partner, and so on. And both types of family, of course, influence us heavily in our consumer behavior. Reference groups and friends influence us. A reference group is a group that we belong to or that we want to belong to, a group that has some influence over us. So our colleagues at work, the students in class, that if you know them, if you're in a large class, in a large lecture where you don't know the other students very well, that wouldn't be a reference group, that would be a crowd, okay? But in a smaller class where you know the other students, where you know them by name, maybe you engage in activities together with them, also that would be a reference group. And these reference group, of course, have a very strong influence on our consumer behavior. External conditioning, external conditions, of course, also influence us, like we see right now, the coronavirus, coronavirus, the climate, the economic conditions, and so on. Then the marketing environment, what the effect that the marketer have on us, for example, at the point of sale. And of course, also situational effects. Situational effects, to give you an example, let's say you go to the supermarket right now and you want to buy face masks. Well, you don't get them in the supermarket. Okay, you go to a pharmacy or drugstore and you want to buy face masks. If there are no face masks, well, you're not going to buy them. That would be a situational effect right now, that the product is not available. Okay, now see, some of these factors are very broad, others are more specific. Culture is definitely the broadest factor, whereas, for example, family is not so broad, and then situational effect may be very, very specific to a particular consumer. The time duration also, culture is the longest because it's ongoing. Since the day we were born, culture has influenced us. Also, culture has many, many different sources. School, the workplace, the media, all of these are sources for culture. Whereas some of the other factors that I mentioned before, there are fewer sources for that. So again, in the course, we're going to talk much more about these factors, about these external factors, but I just wanted to give you an overview of them so you can see what they are. And they are one of the 7 keys to consumer behavior. Okay, here is the next key to consumer behavior, and that is consumer behavior involves different roles. For example, this could be in a family. Think for a moment of a family and they realize they ran out of breakfast cereal. Now, they want to purchase breakfast cereal and they want to use it, right? And within the family, there are different roles with regard to that product, with regard to that purchase. There's what we call the decider or deciders, the user or users, the purchaser, and the influencer or influencers. Now, for this specific product category, breakfast cereals, what do you guys think? Who in the family is the decider, or who are the deciders? So what do you think? Let me know in the chat. Let's see what you What do you think of that? Okay, so the deciders or decider, who is that? Who do you think? I mean, in the family, right? Mom, dad, the kids, the household help, the dog, the parents, not a kid. Okay, what do the others say? Let's hear from everyone, or from some of you at least. What do the others think? Who are the deciders for breakfast cereals? What breakfast cereals to buy? Me, okay. You decide, okay. Good to know, Jacob. Let's hear from the others as well. What's your take on it? Do we get some more? Some more input? It depends. Well, yeah. Well, you could. That's an answer you can say to everything. Okay, but I want you to kind of kind of pinpoint something. Parents unless kids make a request. Okay. Okay. As a matter of fact, guys, in this specific instance, for this particular product, it's mostly the kids who are according to research, it's the kids who are the deciders in most families. Now, I understand, of course, we're an international crowd, a multicultural crowd. It depends on the country. I understand that. But generally speaking, in a lot of families, it's actually the kids who decide which breakfast cereal they will be bought. If you don't trust me on that, just go to your supermarket if you can, okay? But don't go there just for that now, please, okay? Stay at home, but next time, when everything is over, go to the supermarket and look at the breakfast cereal, and you will see in the cereal aisle. When you look at the packages, when you look at the boxes, a lot of these boxes have cartoons on this, little drawings. There might even be little trinkets in there, like toys. Well, that kind of shows you that the cereal makers really communicate with the kids. They really focus on the kids because the studies have shown them that in a lot of families, it's the kids who decide which breakfast cereal will be bought. Now, you say, as I read here in the chat, you guys say, yeah, but the parents want them to be healthy. Yes, I agree with you, of course. I'm not saying that the parents don't have any input. They do have input. They are, in many families, they are the influences. So yes, mom and dad have a say in that as well. But ultimately, in a lot of families, apparently, it's the kids who decide. Now, mom and dad are the influences. Now, who is the purchaser? Well, usually not the kids, right? It's mom or it's dad, whoever goes to the supermarket to purchase it. And the users is everyone in the family who eats breakfast cereals. Okay, let's move on. Yes, the final key to consumer behavior is consumer behavior differs for different people. Consumer behavior, we need to take into consideration individual differences. So not everyone is the same. I guess it is kind of obvious, I suppose, but it's still important, I think, to point that out. Not every consumer is the same. Yes, we can group consumers into segments. That's what market segmentation is for. It's very, very useful. But still, consumers are individuals, so we can't assume that everyone has the same preferences. People differ in their preferences. People differ in their purchases, and therefore, we really need to make an effort to deeply understand them and their breakfast and their preferences. Okay, so much about this, the 7 keys. And now what I would like you to do is, I have a couple of situations for you, and I would like you to have a look at these situations, at these consumer vignettes, as I call them, and tell me what you think, which of the 7 keys mostly applies to these consumer quotes. So let's have a look at them. This one here. So there's this guy here, and this guy in his car. And he says, "My car decision was really easy. I knew what I just wanted. The Camaro was for me. Long, powerful, dark, handsome. All right." So what do you guys think? Which of the 7 keys is most useful to understand this consumer and his consumer behavior? So what would you say? Motivation? Yes, I agree with you. That's motivation. Can you guys be more specific, perhaps? What kind of motive? What kind of motive is that? Because we talked about different types of motives, right? I read here, varies in timing and complexity. Sounds like they're describing a person. A car isn't handsome. At least I don't think so. Okay. Well, I mean, there's some people who think that cars are handsome. Okay. I mean, James, I'm kind of with you also. I mean, I like the convenience of cars. I like driving, but I'm not in love with cars. But there are a lot of people that I know, or some people that I know, who really are, who would think, oh, the car is really attractive, and he clearly does, right? But let's see what you write. Okay, what kind of motive is it? It's self-expressive, actually. It's not a functional motive that he notices that in this case. You see, because it's not about the car being, it's not like a rational decision about the car. He doesn't think about the car rationally, that it takes him from point A to point B, or the fuel consumption, or the safety system, or anything like that. The way he thinks of the car is self-expressive. So it's long, powerful, dark, handsome. He tries to express himself, or how he would like to be, or he wants to be seen, and so on, with this car. So in that sense, it's a self-expressive motive. Now, of course, timing and complexity, yeah, to a certain degree, I think it applies as well. I would say. But I think the most important key here is kind of the self-expressive motive to understand his purchase. Okay, let's move to another example. This one here. It says here. I'd never use Ariel. This lady says, I'd never use Ariel. My daughter plays with a neighbor's child whose clothes have a yellowish tinge, which doesn't say much for her mother. She uses it. I'll only use Tide. It's the best one. I think it's one of the leading sellers too. So what do you think? Which of the keys apply to this consumer? External factors differ for different people. Different for different people, absolutely, right? I mean, sure. I mean, that's by the way something that applies to a lot of these examples here, because right, not everyone thinks of it like that, right? I mean, this lady specifically, that's her particular take on it. Okay, sure. Someone else may have a very different opinion on that. Sure, absolutely. Two of you wrote external factors. Yeah, I think also external factors. Yes, it's external factors. It's social influence. It's a form of social influence, right? Because she compares herself. Like she says, you write here reference groups. Yes, because she compares herself. You know, her children, the neighbor's children, herself, the neighbor, right? The other child's mother, and so on. Absolutely. So she is influenced by external factors here, by social influence. Good. So then, here I have another one for you. This one here. There's this old lady, and she's wearing gloves. Good for her, right? She says, I've started to take a new miracle drug for my arthritis, and I'm feeling a lot better now. I thank Dr. Reed for describing it for me. The cost? It's expensive, I bet, but my medical plan covers most of it. Which of these 7 keys to consumer behavior applies most in this situation? What do you think? So she has arthritis. She uses a drug for it. I mean, okay, medication. It was prescribed by her doctor. She's using it, and someone else pays for it. Different roles. Yes, different roles. Absolutely right. The key thing here, sure, James. I mean, functional motives also. I mean, because she has a pain, she's using it because she has arthritis and she uses it, and she's much better. So in that sense, of course, it's also functional motive. You're right, Sophie. The one that I kind of wanted to use this for to explain is the one that you mentioned here, the different roles. Yes, absolutely right. Now, in this case, it's a little more tricky, right? Because the example that I gave you were about different roles within the family. And now, actually, the different roles, this is not about the different roles within the family. But in this case here, it's still about different roles that she had, the role that she has, the role that the doctor has, and the role of the health insurance plan, right? So in that sense, it's different roles because she is the user. Excuse me. She's the user. The doctor is the decider, and the medical plan pays for it. And that's very important to understand, because this also kind of explains, to a certain degree at least, why healthcare costs tend to go up and up and up. Healthcare costs, usually, not everywhere, but in many countries, grow more than the rate of inflation. And I'm not saying this is the only factor for it, but it's an important one, that there are the different roles here, because she uses it, but she doesn't have to pay for it. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that she should pay for it. I'm glad she has the medical plan, absolutely. I also understand why the doctor makes the decision on which medication to use, because Dr. Reed, he or she is the expert on this. But clearly, since the roles are divided, this is not exactly something that will lower costs, but this is something that will drive costs up. Let me give you one more example of that from a completely different area. And that is, think for a moment about the prices of business class tickets on airplanes. Now, the price of a business class ticket is usually on intercontinental flights, at least, is usually about 3 times as much as an economy class ticket. It depends. There could be special promotions, or so it could go. It varies somewhat, but it's a good estimate for a lot of intercontinental flights that it's about approximately 3 times as much. Now that's a lot, right? Now you might wonder, why is it so expensive? Well, you could say, okay, they offer better food, you have more legroom, there is more personalized service, right? Because a flight attendant can take care of fewer passengers in business class and so on. All of that is true, of course, and still it doesn't really explain the price differential. As a matter of fact, business class and first class, if an airline has that, of course, are major profit contributors to the profitability of an airline. Now, why can airlines charge so much for business class? What do you think? I would like to hear from you guys in the chat again, please. A monopoly? It's not. The airline industry is not a monopoly. There isn't just one. There isn't just one company, not just one airline. It's an oligopoly. Sure, okay, it's an oligopoly. Yeah, but there's something else. Think about what we've just discussed. Supply and demand. Yeah, I mean that's true as well. Sure, but think about what we've just discussed. Can you relate it to the consumer quote? If they raise prices so much, people opt for the competition. Yeah, sure. Of course, there is a limit, right? I mean, if it goes up and up and up, someone may take a different airline. But still, I mean, prices. The business class tickets in general are kind of in that price range. Now, you say social class, not necessarily, I would say. I don't think it's an issue of social class so much. To a certain degree, of course, but not that much, really. Profit? Well, yeah. Profit. They want to make profit for sure, yeah. As do you with your rap channel, right? But there's something else. Think about okay, here's the hint. Think about the different roles. Who flies in economy class? I mean, not only, of course, but if you think of who sits in economy class, who are the people who sit in economy class? Not in economy class, in business class, of course. Who sits in business class mostly? Rich people. Well, not necessarily, actually. No. I mean, some people have a lot of money. Yeah. Okay. True. Some people earn a lot. Sure, have a high income. Sure, but there are also a lot of people in there that do not, because a lot of people. Think of the roles again. The division of different roles. Higher class. Okay. You guys are still with the class concept, kind of. Okay. Yes and no, but I grant you, okay, to a certain degree, yes, sure. But that's not the point that I would like to make. No? Okay, here's my take on it. Look, in business class, when you fly in business class, the deciders, no, James. Actually, the deciders, they don't. For most of the well, Yes, you're right. The deciders. Yes, 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 yes. You're right. Okay, the deciders. Yeah, because if you think of the roles, a lot of people in business class are there. First of all, a certain number of people in business class are there because they upgrade. They got an upgrade. Because if you have a frequent flyer card, right? If you cash in your miles, then they you can also cash it in so that you fly in business class instead. Sure, some people are there like that. Then of course you have airline personnel, pilots who go from one who go back, or flight attendants who go back. If there is space in business class, they can also sit there in many airlines. So you have that. Then of course you have people who pay for it out of their own pocket, but a lot of people who sit in business class don't pay out of their own pocket. That's the thing. They are the deciders. They are the users in particular. They are the users of the service, but someone else pays. You see, because in certain companies, obviously many companies, the company pays for the flight. If it's a business trip, the company pays. So it's not the people paying for themselves. It's the company pays for it, but then the employee, the manager, sits on the plane. Now, obviously, if I don't have to pay for the flight myself, but someone else pays for it, would I fly business class? Well, sure, yeah, hey, actually, put me in first. But if I have to pay for it myself, of course, then I would think more about that. I noticed this because I fly both economy class and business class. I'm mostly self-employed. I have my own company, and when I go on a business trip, I really think about it twice, before I book business class, simply because I pay for it out of my own pocket, and so I think about it: is it worth it or is it not worth it? So for some intercontinental flights, I've taken business class a couple of times before, sure, but for example, for a flight within Europe, I would never take business class because it's just not worth it. It's more expensive. As a matter of fact, in Europe, it's not 3 times as much. It's less, but still, it's just not worth it. On an intercontinental flight, it depends. Sometimes I take it, sometimes I don't take it. Now, sometimes, being a consultant, also my clients may pay for it. Now, if I agree with them in my contract that they pay for business class, sure, hey, it's them paying it. So right, so it's about the different roles, and that of course drives up the prices, because if everyone who sits in business class had to pay their own ticket, they would think about it, if they are more, obviously, and yes, it would still be more expensive than economy class, but I don't think that airlines there would be that much of a price differential as there is now, where the user, the person sitting on the plane, and the payer, the purchaser, are different, separate. Okay. Now, I would say this is a good time for a break. I mean, we have been going on for a long time, so I'm gonna take a break, and it would be nice, guys, if you could come back, if you tune into this channel again. So I will be back at 3:30. That's 15 minutes from now. So at 3:30, I'll continue here. Stay tuned, as they say. See you guys later. Okay, so it's 3:30, and I'm back. So let's continue. Let's continue with our class. Here's my next topic. So let's see for a second. Our next topic are pitfalls in the study of consumer behavior. So when you study consumer behavior, when you engage in consumer research, there are certain mistakes that you could make. And I would like to show you some of these mistakes that you need to watch out for so that you will get accurate results, you get good insights into consumers. So what are these pitfalls or traps to fall into? Here they are. I call them the unspecified focus, the single-minded explanation, the me mentality, and the applications only, please. So let's look at them one by one. The first pitfall is what's called the unspecified focus. What I mean by that is when you study consumer behavior, you need to be very, very precise about which behavior you are actually focusing on, which behavior you are studying. What is it exactly that you want to find out? There is, like in every other field, there is specific terminology in consumer research as well, and you should be really familiar with that terminology and use it correctly, because otherwise you may, the research that you do may not be very accurate because you may measure the wrong things. So, for example, there are terms like attitudes, customer satisfaction, emotions, beliefs, and so on. And you should use them the right way, and it should be very, very clear to you what exactly you are measuring. If not, you suffer from the unspecified focus. You need to have a very, very clear goal in what you want to find out about specific consumer behavior, and you should use the right terms to name it. The next problem, the next pitfall, is the so-called single-minded explanation. By that I mean we shouldn't just assume that for a certain behavior there's only one single factor, because behavior is much, much more complex. Human behavior is much, much more complex. Usually there isn't just one factor that leads to one specific behavior, but usually there are several factors that together contribute to a certain behavior, that lead to a certain behavior. To give you a simple example, it would be kind of a single-minded explanation to think that consumers buy toothpaste only to clean their teeth. Of course, that's why they do it. Of course, that's why most consumers buy toothpaste. But there are also some other factors as well. Consumers also buy toothpaste because they want to have white teeth. Consumers buy toothpaste because they want to have a fresh breath. Consumers buy toothpaste because they want to get that bad taste out of their mouth in the morning, and so on. So there's a variety of different reasons for it, not just one. It would be a single-minded explanation if you just consider one of those factors. So keep that in mind when you study consumer behavior. Here's the next pitfall. That's the me mentality. The me mentality means that when you study consumer behavior, you shouldn't assume that everyone is like you. Sure, other people have something in common with you, absolutely, right? We all have things in common as human beings, but that doesn't mean that we're all the same. And just because you like particular products or certain brands, because you engage in certain behaviors, this absolutely does not mean that other people do as well. Even people of your same age group, even people who who are similar to you in many ways, like maybe other students. Not every student is the same. Not every 23-year-old is the same. Not every person living in a particular place, in a particular town is the same. People vary very much. And it's really a big trap that we can fall into, to assume that others are like us. To give you an example, think about food habits, what food we eat, and what food we kind of like. So think about your favorite food. Are you thinking about it? Okay. So if you think about your favorite food, you know, do you think that other people like that food as well? Well, some will, but others will not. Now think about the food that you don't like at all. Some other people might not like it as well, but a lot of people will like it. To give you a personal example, I hate cabbage. I really don't like cabbage at all. Everything that's related to the cabbage family, I hate. Broccoli, cauliflower, white cabbage, red cabbage, Brussels sprouts. Oh, disgusting. Absolutely. I don't like it at all. I don't like the taste. I don't like the smell. I can't stand the stuff. And still, how about you? Do you like any of these? Do you like cauliflower? Do you like broccoli? Do you like red cabbage, white cabbage, whatever that stuff is? Maybe you do. You see, if I just assume that you're like me on this, then I make a big mistake. I would really misjudge and misinterpret your consumer behavior and your preferences. So it's very, very important to step out of that me mentality. We all fall into this trap. It's normal, right? That's human nature that we do this. But if we want to understand consumers, we really need to be careful to avoid this me mentality. Here's the final pitfall, and that is applications only, please. Applications only, please means that we assume that only if something has an immediate application can it be useful for consumer behavior and for marketers. Don't do this. You know, in this course, I'll use a lot of real life examples. I hope that you real life applications for marketing, how you can apply consumer behavior knowledge to marketing. But let's not be overly simplistic, and let's not just say everything needs to have an immediate application, because there's also some knowledge about consumers that may not, at least at first glance, have an immediate application to marketing strategy, and still it's important stuff, and you should learn about it and you should try to understand it, because not everything has immediate applications. That doesn't mean that in the long run it might not be important. So yes, I will give you many examples of how you can use consumer behavior insights in marketing strategy, but don't just look for an application for every little thing that I tell you. We're at the university after all, right? So we want to have a bit of a more broader knowledge than just very, very applications only. Okay. Now we will talk about a new topic, and our next topic is going to be different perspectives on consumer behavior. As you will see, there isn't just one perspective on how we can look at consumer behavior, but there is actually at least 3 perspectives. So let's have a look at that. Let's have a look at the different perspectives on consumer behavior. So here they are. The first perspective of consumer behavior is the marketer's perspective. Now, the marketer's perspective, I would assume, is the one that most of you are most familiar with, because if you study business and if you study marketing, that's kind of the perspective that we usually take. That's also the perspective, you know, if you're a business owner like myself, if you work for a company in marketing or related fields, this would be the perspective that you take, the marketer's perspective, looking at consumer behavior from the point of view of the marketer. But it's certainly not the only perspective. There's also the consumer perspective. Now, the consumer perspective is how consumers view consumer behavior, and that is quite different from the marketer's perspective. So we also know the consumer perspective, of course, because we are all consumers. It's just sometimes when we act as marketers, we forget about it. And I think it's quite important to be aware of the consumer perspective because it gives us additional insights. So we'll talk about that a little bit now. The last perspective is the policymaker's perspective. The policymaker's perspective is the perspective of politicians, of judges, of consumer protection agencies, and so on. So this is really the perspective of people and governments and offices that try to protect the interest of consumers. So the government is also interested in consumer behavior because consumers sometimes, need to be protected. Consumers are not always rational. Consumers can, of course, also be exploited by companies. I'm not saying it's always the companies that are bad and the consumers that are good. There are also consumers, who act very badly, as we'll see later, the dark side of consumer behavior. But let's face it, some consumers do need, at least to a certain degree, be protected. How much they need to be protected, that differs very much on, how should I say, on the country, on the political ideology, and so on. But in most countries, and most political parties also would say that there needs to be at least some kind of consumer protection. And if you want to protect consumers from fraud and exploitation and so on, it's also very important to understand consumer behavior because you need to understand how consumers think, how they feel, how they act, how they react to certain stimuli if you want to enact legislation to protect them. So much about the policymaker perspective. Let's now look at the difference between the marketers and the consumers' perspective in more detail. So the marketers and consumers' views. Now, the consumer perspective is the view of the consumer, right? It's the view of the consumer behavior from the standpoint of the consumer, us as consumers. So it's helpful for marketers to understand the consumer's perspective because if we understand how consumers view their own consumer behavior, then of course, we can use this in our own marketing strategies. So what is the difference between marketers and consumers' perspective? One of the difference is the difference between the internal and the external view. Marketers act in the external world. So marketers don't work inside the mind of the consumer. On the other hand, consumers' thoughts, feelings, and decisions are private. So what I, as a consumer, think of a particular product or service or a company, the marketer doesn't directly know. That's my own private world. That's inside my head. Of course, for marketers, it would be nice to know what goes inside the consumers, and therefore, we use consumer research to get the better understanding of the internal view of consumer behavior. That doesn't mean, of course, that we can directly look into consumers' brains. Yes, I know there is neuroscience and there's neuromarketing, and yes, we can look into the brain at a certain level. We can also measure what goes on inside the brain with scales, etc. Absolutely, but we cannot directly look inside the brains. And let's face it, that's a good thing, I guess. Now, another difference between the two views is the difference between the aggregate view and the individual level view. The aggregate view is really the marketer's view. Marketers view consumers as part of a market, not as individuals, but as a market or as a member of a target group. On the other hand, individuals, consumers, see themselves as individuals. That's the individual view. Think about it for a second. Do you consider yourself being part of a target group? I don't. I'm sure I am part of many market segments or target groups, but that's not how I view myself in everyday life. I don't act as the member of a target group, as a member of a market segment, but I act as Klaus Ebster, and you act as yourself also. That's a very different view from the marketer's view. Another view is the product specific versus the across product views. By that I mean consumers can specialize in buying the way marketers do in their selling. Marketers can really specialize in selling. So if you are a marketer who sells soft drinks, you know a lot about the soft drink market. You know a lot about how consumers buy soft drinks, what preferences they have, what is available in the market, what the competition does, and all of that, because that's your business. You specialize in soft drinks. Now, if you are a bank, well, then you know a lot about banking and consumer behavior related to banking and so on. But as a consumer, you see, we both buy soft drinks and we use banks. So we can't just specialize in one thing. So like here on my slide, you can see this shopping basket full of tangerines. Now, if you are an orchard, right, an orange grove, okay, if you run an orange grove, then you know a lot about, I hope you know a lot about what people prefer in citrus fruit and what varieties they like, how they purchase citrus and so on. But as a consumer, obviously, the shopping basket, the way it looks here, is not what it usually looks like, because usually we don't just fill our shopping basket with tangerines and oranges. We buy oranges, and we buy meat, and we buy vegetables, and we buy disinfectant wipes, and we buy cell phones and books, etc., etc., etc. So we can't just specialize in one product category, and that, of course, has implications. We know much less about this specific category, at least, than marketers do, because they can specialize. Another difference is the brand specific versus the best alternative view. Marketers always act as if the best purchase for a particular consumer were the brand that they are offering. So for a marketer, a marketer always acts like, whatever product I offer, that's the best product. Okay, my brand is always the best. That's normal. That's what marketers have to do, right? That's just the marketer's view. That's part of the game. But for a consumer, of course, it's different, because for a consumer, the consumer is interested in obtaining the alternative that is best for himself or herself. So a consumer really can't just specialize in one product, and the consumer has to take the best choice for this specific consumer. So that's very, very different from the marketer. That needs to be understood. So, right, very, very different perspective. Marketer acts like their product, our product, is the best product. For the consumer, it's very different. They can't just say, okay, this is one best product. They need to look at different products, and they need to make a choice, make it the best choice based on their preferences and based on their needs. Okay. So what's another difference? Another difference is influencing behavior versus handling the influence. Now, the role of a marketer is to influence consumers. That's just what marketers do. Marketers want to influence consumers. They need to influence consumers so that they purchase their product. On the other hand, consumers must find ways to adapt to all these marketing stimuli that are around. You say in today's world, there are so many marketing stimuli. Marketing is everywhere. Advertising is everywhere. Marketing communication is everywhere. And we have to find ways to handle all of this, because there are just so many stimuli, and we can't purchase everything. We can't respond to every stimulus as a consumer. So we really also have to handle intrusive stimuli. As I said, marketing stimuli are everywhere. There are very few places these days where you can go and there are no marketing stimuli. No, there's intrusive stimuli everywhere. Look, like even in the restroom, they are right. I mean, you go to the restroom to take a pee. You go to the restroom, and still there is some advertising. It's hard to escape advertising. It's hard to escape marketing. What we do have to escape marketing, because we can't, as consumers, we can't just give in to all the influence attempts. It's just not possible, because if we did, we would soon enough die, because we can't eat everything that marketing suggests to us. We can't drink everything that marketing suggests to us. We can't buy everything that marketing suggests us. We would be broke. We would be ill. We couldn't function. So we have to constantly ward off these intrusive, more or less intrusive stimuli. Right? So for the marketers, really, this is the influence attempt seen by the marketer. Let's say the marketer is Levi's, the jeans brand, and there are millions of consumers out there. And of course, for Levi's, it's about getting the message out. Wear Levi's, okay? That's the message that we want to send as Levi's to the consumers. But on the other hand, the consumers, the influence attempts as seen by the consumers isn't just wear Levi's, but it's also drink Red Bull, shop at Billa, drive BMW, buy IBM, use Persil, drink a coffee at Starbucks, read The Economist. All of these different influence attempts. There's so many of them. So from the consumer's perspective, that's very, very different than from the marketer's perspective. We really have to find ways to deal with all these influence attempts. So what are the implications of this? The implications are that consumers cannot follow the marketing system's consumption allocation recommendations. We can't buy everything. We can't use everything. We can't use it in the quantities that marketers want us to use it. Consumers cannot follow all the brand recommendations. If I buy one brand of car, well, maybe I buy a second brand of car, but how many people, have, I don't know, 50, 60, 100 different cars in their garage? Very few people, I would say, right? Even for shampoo, I mean, how many different brands of shampoos would you have? I mean, it just doesn't make sense to have 20 different brands of shampoo in your bathroom. Some people have more, others have less, I guess, but we can't follow all the brand recommendations. We really have to resist to persuasive attempts as consumers. Now, as marketers, we have to persuade consumers, of course. Our job is to influence them, but as consumers, we have to resist, because otherwise we couldn't live, we couldn't really survive. And that the implication is really that this, of course, makes it really, really hard for marketers, because there is so much competition out there, and the competition also sends these messages that we send. So we really have to find ways to break through the clutter to communicate with consumers and try to influence them that way. Okay, now the implications of this is that consumers' skill levels tend to be really, really low. Let me ask you a little bit about your own skill levels as consumers. I would like to know from you guys, in which areas do you think are you really good as a consumer? You personally. Are there certain areas where you say, okay, I really know my way around this kind of product or this kind of service because I use it a lot, or I have some expertise in that? Could you use the chat, please, and let me know some areas where you think you are really good as a consumer? Okay, let's see. Vitamins. Okay, you know a lot about vitamins. You have some experience in that. You have looked at different brands of vitamin brands. You've researched it and so on. Okay, good. Okay, so that's where you're an expert on. Okay, what else do I see? Computer components. Also, okay, great. So you know all about computers and computer components. Okay. Um, Vinyls, okay. Okay. Are you talking, Victoria? Do you refer to? I'm not exactly sure what you're referring to. Are you referring to the old-fashioned kind of records? Is that what you're referring to? Or what is it that you mean? Could you let me know in the chat? Okay. Clothes. Okay. Okay. Records. Okay. Cool. So you're into the old-fashioned records. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So you would know, for example, where to buy them, right? What the best sources are, how to preserve them, and so on. Okay. Okay. Clothes. Okay. Foods. Healthy food. Good. Okay. Great. Okay. So there are some areas that we are really good at. Some areas, yeah, which records are overpriced and so on. Okay. Sure. Yeah. There are some areas that we're really good at, where we know a lot because we're really interested in it, or maybe it's just very important to be knowledgeable about it. I guess if you have a family and you have kids and you want to make sure that they eat healthy food and so on, then you might really research that and find the best sources for healthy food and stuff like that. Now, if you're really into computers, then you know your computer components, or maybe you've even worked in the area or something like this, right? Sure. So that's absolutely the case. There are certain areas that we know a lot, but you see, there are so many other areas out there as consumers that we don't know much about. Let me just ask you this: who of you has bought an apartment or a house? Can you please, those of you who have, just write it in the chat. Okay, I've bought an apartment or I've bought a house. Can you write that, please? No one? Okay. Okay, maybe when someone is still writing it, but we're broke students. Okay, yeah, okay, yeah, maybe you are, but also you're students. You're still yes, exactly. I have to live on 40 euros per week, right? What are you talking about? Yeah, exactly, right? I mean, I know it was a facetious question. I got it, right? So, what my point was, buying a house or an apartment, you don't have much expertise on that, right? Because mostly, I mean, you say you're broke students, but mostly because you're young, right? I mean, so maybe later you're going to buy a house someday, or maybe an apartment, or maybe you're going to buy a second house or something like this. A dollhouse. Okay. Okay. That's a good one. Okay. Dollhouse, that kind of, I think of horror movies now where someone is then put in a dollhouse or something like this. But anyway, and you look out from inside the dollhouse. Anyway, so you haven't done that. Well, mostly look because you're young, right? And it's normal that you haven't done that yet. It's the consumer life cycle. Okay, it's the consumer life cycle. Eventually, you might buy a house or an apartment or even more than one. But the first time you do it, you're not going to be very experienced. Now, I really hope that you do your research well before you buy your first house or apartment, because it's a costly decision, right? It's a lot of money that you spend on that, and you want to make a good choice. But it's hard. People make a lot of mistakes when they do this, because it's not a purchase that people make very frequently. Think of other things. Who of you has taken out insurance? Well, maybe some of you have, right? But who of you has taken out more than one type of insurance? Who has taken out 2 types of insurance, 3 types of insurance, and so on? Again, buying insurance, you also need to have some knowledge about that, right? And you might not. Now, look, I'm not that experienced in many areas as well, by the way. Yes, I've bought houses and I've bought apartments and so on, but there are other things, that I haven't done yet. And when I make a purchase in that area, I might not be, I might as well make a mistake. So particularly for purchases that we make less frequently, we're not very experienced. So for purchases that we make frequently, we have more experience, I guess. But for purchases that we make less frequently, we don't have much experience, and therefore it's easy that we make mistakes. And that really is the issue here, right? So basically, because of these infrequent purchases and because of the consumer life cycle, that we make certain purchases at certain stages in our lives, this is why consumers tend to be not that good, or not as good as they should be. We are not as good as consumers as we should be, really, because of that issue. There's also an interesting aspect of this, and that is, sometimes people think that older consumers, senior citizens, sometimes they look down at them and they say, oh, they've lived their life and they don't know what they're doing and they don't know technology and so on. But you know what? As a matter of fact, research shows us that senior citizens, older people, tend to be quite savvy consumers. Yes, I understand maybe grandpa or grandma doesn't, know how to use a tablet, or maybe she does, right? Or they're not into social media so much and so on. There are certain technologies for that, at least for the very old, are challenging. But generally speaking, older consumers tend to be better consumers. Not on everything, because some of them, of course, have some problems with remembering or things like that. But those of them that are healthy and they, or at least lucid, they tend to be quite good consumers because they have a lot of experience. It's not necessarily that they're naturally so much smarter than younger generations or anything like that, but it's just they have more experience. They have bought their houses, they have bought their cars, they have taken out the insurance, they have dealt with scams, they have dealt with fraud, they have dealt with many things before as a consumer. So they had a lot of experience, and because of that, interestingly enough, while yes, there are scams that are directed at older people, like right now, for example, in this crisis, there are people knocking on people's doors, and they wear masks and they say they're, I don't know, the health authority, and they try to trick them out of money. All of that exists. I get that. And there are some older people, that have some cognitive issues, sure, but a lot of them don't, and they're very experienced consumers. So, at least there's one thing to look forward to when getting older, we become better consumers. Or at least most of us. Some will never learn, I guess, but it also depends on personality and things like that. But overall, that's a good thing about aging, I guess. We become better consumers. We might not be able to read the label anymore on the package, right? But at least we become better consumers. Okay, finally, let's talk a little bit about the dark side of consumer behavior. The dark side. Okay. Now, what am I talking about when I mean the dark side? When I mean the dark side, I mean consumers not behaving the way they should. Consumers are not always good. They're not always nice. They don't always behave appropriately. And I think if we look at consumer behavior, I think we should look at that as well. There is many different aspects of the dark side of consumer behavior, but I'll just want to point out a few of them to you. So let's have a look. Let's walk on the dark side, okay? What is there? Well, first of all, there is what's called addictive consumption. Addictive consumption, right? There's all kinds of different addictions, and of course, there are also consumer addictions, right? So when people really psychologically depend on certain products or services, there are some people who have a shopping addiction, who are, the term is shopaholics. I mean, that's not the medical or the psychological term, of course. That's more like a popular term. But I think what I know, you know what I mean by that. Shopaholics, people who are compulsive shoppers. I don't mean by that, people who just like to shop. And you know what? I mean, if you go out, I'm sure, once the crisis is over, a lot of us will go out to the stores and maybe we buy a little more than we should, perhaps, or because we are happy to be back in the consumer marketplace, so to say. Is that addictive? No, that's not what I'm talking about. Not some of these purchases that maybe we make once all this is over may not be the smartest purchases, perhaps, because we make some impulse purchases, stuff like that. But still, that's not shopping addiction. That's still normal. That's still normal consumer behavior. But shopping addiction is a form of abnormal shopping behavior. Some people really are addicted. They purchase a lot for a variety of reasons. I mean, there can be many underlying reasons, in their lives why they do it and why they fall into this addiction. I mean, but it's a fact that they do. I mean, for example, we know that there is a lot of online shopping where people shop a lot and then return it. Now, again, not all of this is addiction. Just because you return something doesn't mean you're addicted to shopping. It could just be, that you want to try out certain products and you send back the others. Is it a form of dark consumer behavior if you order 10 pairs of shoes and you send back 9 pairs of shoes? I would say yes, it is the dark side. I think it's not okay, it's not fair, it's not appropriate. I mean, if you overuse that, I understand, to a certain degree, many people do that, but there are some people who really overdo it. That's I guess is already a bit of dark side, but it's not addiction. I mean, they do it, just because they can, I guess, That's like, I don't know, if you go to a soda fountain, not so much in Austria, I guess, but in many countries, like in the US, right, you go to a fast food restaurant or something like this, you can have free refills. You can take as much soda as you like. Now, you take 1, you take 2, you take 3. I'm sure there are some people, just because they can, they take 20. I mean, is that okay? Well, I mean, the company is not gonna go bankrupt because of that. But it's still, it's slightly dark. Maybe it's gray, Again, is it addiction? I don't know if that's addiction, but addiction really means that you purchase something and then you purchase more, maybe you accumulate debt also. That then it becomes really, really serious. So that's what I mean by addictive behavior, right? Of course, addiction can also be something to certain products. Think about alcoholism. Is an addiction. It's also related to consumer behavior. It's consumption, right? So I found this here. There is a magazine called The Modern Drunkard. Don't ask me who subscribes to this magazine. They should subscribe to medicine instead of magazines. Yeah. Okay. So that's addictive consumption. Yeah, and compulsive consumption. We talked about that before, right? Repetitive shopping. I mean, people just can't stop shopping. And finally, I would like to talk a little bit about illegal activities. There are many illegal activities as well with regard to consumer behavior. And the one thing that comes to mind first, I guess, is consumer theft, shrinkage, as it's called by retailers, shoplifting, basically, right? Retailers use a lot of money by shrinkage. Now, some of that shrinkage is due to employees who steal. Of course, most of them don't, but there's always some, bad apples, so to say, who do. But of course, also of consumers who go to the store and steal stuff. Some of it could be very, very little, and it could be relatively harmless. I mean, think of a teenager who is maybe in a crazy phase and steals a little thing. But some shoplifting is very serious. In total, it's millions and millions of euros that retailers lose every year because of that. And of course, consumer behavior knowledge is also used to reduce that. So I have done studies also on that, and I have consulted with retailers. Have also hired me, to find ways, psychological ways to deal with that. And if you want, in the future, we can talk about that as well. So that's theft. And then another thing is anti-consumption. In anti-consumption, those are activities where the consumer doesn't steal anything, but they they mutilate, they deliberately mutilate products, they deface them, they break them, they ruin them. Why? Well, they may be angry at the retailer. It may be a product that they don't like or don't consider ethical. Some people are just mean. I mean, there is vandalism in other areas of life as well, and of course, there is also vandalism by consumers in stores. That, of course, is an issue as well. I mean, of course, it can go even further. I mean, this is still relatively harmless, but there are also cases, maybe you've read about them in the media from time to time. In some countries, there are cases where products, usually food products, are poisoned. For example, in Italy, for years there was a person or a group of people, I have no idea, who poisoned food. I mean, they usually poisoned mineral water. They would inject the poison into the bottle or something like this. It went on for years. I think it has stopped now. A couple of years ago. I'm not 100% sure. I would have to research that myself. But that, of course, we're very, very serious. Or many years ago in the United States, there was a huge case about the painkiller, about the pain medication. I think Tylenol that was poisoned. This then led to seals and caps that you can see when someone opened it and things like that. So that is, of course, an extreme form of that anti-consumption, if you will. Other cases are less severe, but still very annoying. People who just mutilate products just because, for whatever reasons, maybe to relieve their frustration or whatever it is. Finally, at the very end of this lecture, I just wanted to talk a little bit about shoplifting also. And I've also studied shoplifting, and it's quite a fascinating area. I mean, I'm sure you can find a lot of videos on the internet about that also, how people shoplift. There's all kinds of tricks that they have. And you can see two of them here, like one of the open bag trick, like this lady here. This is from actually security footage. She has this open bag and she looks at the product, she looks at the cosmetics products, and then whoop, something drops into her open bag. Oh, by accident, right? Or here you can see another example is here, the umbrella trick. The umbrella trick, you can see here, this lady on the right, she has this umbrella, and again, something just drops into her umbrella. There's even much more sophisticated ways of doing this, I guess. My favorite in quotation mark, is the parcel trick, where someone has a package, a parcel, it's wrapped, but there is a device at the bottom. There is a device at the bottom of this parcel, and it opens on the inside, and so the shoplifter just takes this nicely wrapped parcel and puts it on top of the product. The product gets sucked up, and it's inside the package, and it still kind of looks wrapped. That's the way how the pros do it, I guess. Anyway, so with this short walk on the dark side, I would like to conclude our online class now. At this point, guys, do you have any questions? Is there anything that at the end of this class I can answer for you? Anything that I've covered in the lecture that you would like to know more about? Anything that is unclear? Anything about the class? Just let me know in the chat, please. Let's see if there are any questions coming my way. In the meantime, we will have this class again in this format. So just look at your schedule. I will live stream my next class as well. So the next consumer behavior class will be live streamed on YouTube as well. Just look at your schedule. I haven't changed any of my class times. I'll just continue live streaming instead of being in the classroom. So it would be really nice if you could join me again. Let's see if I find anything here. Would exam contain single choice questions? Okay, about the exam. Yeah, the exam is going to be a multiple choice exam, but I think since you have had my multiple choice exams before, it's again a multiple choice exam where there's one correct answer choice. So yes, so there will be, the exam will again be a multiple choice exam, and there's one correct answer choice per question. Don't worry, we can talk more about the exam in the future again, also if you have any questions. But I think by now you're kind of used to my exams, right? I mean, you guys have had 2 of them already, so it's not completely new or completely unexpected, I guess. Let's see what else we got. The next lesson will be according to the schedule. Yes, it will be according to the schedule. Yes, I will stick to my schedule because I think that's the easiest way of doing it. You know, if you reschedule online classes, or when you move online and you reschedule your classes, then that can be confusing for students because they may have other classes. And so I've kept all my classes actually according to my schedules so far at different universities and so on. Yeah. A bit more explanation about anti-consumption. Well, anti-consumption is really, you see, anti-consumption is if people are against consumption. They can be against consumption for various reasons, and you know, obviously, anti-consumption could be something harmless. I mean, if you just feel, you know, that people are too, kind of consuming too much, and we should kind of step back a little bit and become, I don't know, more frugal in our ways, and not go shopping so much, or you know, look for simple products or anything like that. That's perfectly fine. Obviously, that's not something illegal, or that's not something unethical. I mean, people have some good reasons for that, I would say. But anti-consumption that kind of crosses the line, you know, where it becomes either unethical or illegal. This is what I was talking here about the dark side. When anti-consumption, when someone mutilates products. I mean, if they for a variety of reasons, vandalism, that's a form of anti-consumption. You know, you hate a company, and because of that, the person who does this kind of breaks the product. Or, you know, just for fun, does it just for fun, or just to annoy the retailer, or to annoy the manufacturer? That's a form of anti-consumption. And of course, you know, the worst thing is then if they poison the product, or if they kind of if they kind of do something to the product so that it won't work for the next person who buys it, you know. It won't work for them. That's a form of unethical or illegal anti-consumption that I was talking about. I'm not saying that this is like very prevalent. It's not that a lot of people do this. The vast majority of people don't do these things, but it does exist. It is a phenomenon. And if we talk about the dark side, that's what we're talking about here. Anything else? Any other questions that I can answer for you? Nothing right now? Okay. Well, in that case, guys, I really hope that everything is going well for you. I thank you for attending our class. I wish you all the best for the next couple of days and weeks. You and, of course, also your families, particularly your parents and your grandparents and the most vulnerable people in your families or in your circle of friends and acquaintances. We will have class again in this format on the next scheduled date. So just check your schedule, and I really look forward to seeing you again. And yeah, one more thing. On the website, as I told you, tonight or tomorrow, I will put up that wiki, and I will write group 2, group 1, group 2, group 3, and so on. And then please assign yourself to the working teams. Again, thanks for attending this lecture. All the best to all of you guys, and I hope to see you in person soon. I would like to see your faces again. Until then, take care, everyone. Bye. No more questions. Okay. Bye now. Bye, Nicole. Okay. Stay safe, guys. Bye.